You know the story. We've all heard it. Nearly 5,000 years ago, the Egyptian pharaoh Khufu decides to build the Great Pyramid of Giza as his tomb. We're told that tens of thousands of workers, using nothing but simple copper tools and raw muscle power, built this absolute masterpiece in about 20 years. It's the story you read in every single textbook. But what if the stones themselves tell a completely different story?
What if that neat and tidy story isn't just missing a few details, but is actually a deliberate cover-up? What if the real story behind this incredible monument is so much stranger and so much older than we've ever been told?
I mean, this is the core of the whole problem, right here. On one side, you've got the official toolkit, copper chisels, which are pretty soft, and some rope. And on the other side, you've got these massive, multi-ton blocks of granite, one of the hardest stones on the planet, cut with a kind of precision that would make modern engineers sweat. There's a huge gap there that just, well, it doesn't make any sense.
So let's start poking at the official story and see where the cracks are. Because once you start looking at the Great Pyramid less like a tourist and more like a detective, the whole thing starts to unravel pretty darn fast.
Okay, so if it's a pharaoh's tomb, you'd expect to find certain things, right? Well, inside the Great Pyramid, you find basically none of them. Every other royal tomb in Egypt is covered in glorious hieroglyphs and paintings. The Great Pyramid, it's almost completely blank. There are no definitive inscriptions from Khufu's time saying, "I built this." No treasure has ever been found. And the biggest thing of all, no body, no mummy, nothing. It's a tomb with no one in it.
That glaring lack of evidence makes you ask a really basic question. If this giant, mind-bogglingly complex structure wasn't a tomb, then what in the world was it? Was it something else entirely, something more functional, or maybe way more advanced than we give it credit for? And that's before we even get to the engineering. This is where the mystery really deepens, because the physical evidence of how this thing was built is so nuts, it has left modern engineers just scratching their heads.
Just think about this number for a second. 80 tons. That's how much some of the solid granite beams inside the king's chamber weigh. To give you some perspective, that's like a whole stack of about 40 cars. And these gigantic stones were somehow cut from a quarry over 500 miles away, dragged to the site, and then lifted hundreds of feet into the air. How? How do you do that without cranes or heavy machinery? The official story just doesn't have a good answer.
And when you look closely at the stones, that's where the official story completely falls apart. An engineer named Christopher Dunn has spent decades analyzing these blocks, and what he found is wild. The granite shows clear evidence of advanced machining. We're talking about core drill holes with spiral grooves that suggest a really high-speed drill rate. People have tried to replicate this with copper tools. You know what happens? The tools get shredded. It just doesn't work.
And then there's this little detail that's just impossible to ignore. It gets pitch black inside those long, narrow passages. So the workers would have needed light, right? The obvious answer is fire, torches. But if they used torches, the ceilings would be covered in black soot. And guess what? They're perfectly clean. There isn't a single scorch mark to be found, anywhere. It's a simple little fact that creates a massive problem.
So let's just recap. How do you quarry and lift 80-ton blocks, cut them with machine-like precision, and then assemble them in total darkness without leaving a single trace of your light source? Seriously, how? The mainstream explanation just doesn't hold water.
All right, now let's take a little walk over to the pyramid's next-door neighbor, the Great Sphinx, because carved right into the stone of the Sphinx and its enclosure is a piece of evidence that could completely rewrite the official timeline of, well, everything.
See, researchers like John Anthony West and geologist Dr. Robert Schoch pointed out something amazing. The weathering on the Sphinx isn't what you'd expect from thousands of years of wind and sand. Wind erosion is sharp, it cuts into the stone. But the erosion on the Sphinx is deep, rounded, and has vertical fissures. That's a classic textbook sign of one thing and one thing only: water. Lots and lots of rain, for a very long time.
And here's the huge problem that creates. Geologists are pretty clear on this. The last time the Giza Plateau saw enough consistent heavy rainfall to cause that kind of erosion was before 10,000 BC. But mainstream Egyptology says the Sphinx was built around 2500 BC, when the place was already the desert we see today. The geology is telling us the Sphinx could be 8,000 years older than the history books claim.
So if the Sphinx is that old, it opens up a mind-blowing possibility. What if we've been looking at the Giza Plateau all wrong? What if these monuments aren't the beginning of a civilization, but the end of one? What if they're just the last surviving relics of a much older, much more advanced civilization that we've completely forgotten about?
And this is where it gets even crazier.
A researcher named Robert Bauval discovered that the layout of the 3 Giza pyramids on the ground is an uncanny match for the 3 stars in Orion's belt in the sky. But it's not just a random match. Using computer models to track the stars back in time, he found that the alignment is absolutely perfect for how the sky looked in one specific year, 10,500 BC, the exact same time frame the water erosion on the Sphinx points to. That's not just a coincidence, that's a pattern. And you have to understand, it isn't just Giza. You see these fingerprints of a lost high technology all over Egypt. You see incredible knowledge of astronomy. You see these same precision tool marks at other ancient sites. It might even explain one of the biggest mysteries of all, why Egyptian civilization seems to pop into existence out of nowhere, already fully formed. Maybe they didn't invent it all. Maybe they inherited it.
So if all this evidence is sitting right there in plain sight, you have to be asking yourself, why isn't this the mainstream story? Why is it brushed aside as a fringe theory? Well, this is where our ancient mystery turns into a very modern controversy about who gets to control the past.
For many, many years, the world of Egyptian archaeology was dominated by one man, Dr. Zahi Hawass. Now, he's done a lot to promote Egypt's history, but he's also become famous for shutting down any research that goes against the official story. This quote here was literally his answer when asked about exploring a mysterious door found deep inside the pyramid. It kind of tells you everything you need to know.
And there is so much more to find. Back in the 90s, a little robot found a sealed door deep inside a shaft. A decade later, they finally drilled a tiny hole through it, only to find another sealed door right behind it. That second door has never been opened. And then, just a few years ago, scientists using high-tech scans found a gigantic hidden chamber, a huge void inside the pyramid. And yet, requests to really go in and explore it have been denied.
So you see the problem here. The official reason for all this secrecy is to protect Egypt's heritage. But what ends up happening is that independent research gets blocked, and any theory that challenges the textbook version of history gets silenced. It really makes you wonder, is the real goal to protect history, or is it to protect just one version of history?
So in the end, this is where we are. We have physical, geological evidence that contradicts the official timeline. We have engineering that seems impossible with the official tools, and we have sealed doors and hidden chambers that the authorities are refusing to fully investigate. All of it points to a story that is so much bigger, so much older, and so much more mysterious than the one we've been told. And it leaves us with one final huge question. What secrets are still buried under all that sand, and will we ever be allowed to discover them?